welcome to Pesto Comics Audio Edition. This is the entry for September 25th, 2024. To the Hammer and back again. Surviving the weekend at Hamilton Comic-Con. Before we begin, I have a few things to cover. Coming up next, Big Smoke Pulp Volume 1. Though this is Pesto Comics, we're not restricting what we're putting out to comics alone. Up next is a project that's a little different. It's a prose short story anthology with over 40 authors and 300 plus pages of content. We're going to keep the goal nice and low to get it in everyone's hands. We'll be launching sometime in October. I'm restricted from launching another campaign until From Parts Unknown is fulfilled, which should be soon. Therefore, until I can get that pre-launch page up, I won't be able to set a concrete launch date. This might push the rest of the timeline forward as well, as I wanted to launch Naked Kaiju Woman #1 in November, and I wouldn't want to launch that in December, so we'll just have to see how the calendar plays out given this delay. Once Kickstarter deems me a creator in good standing, I'll be able to launch at the much quicker rate that I'm hoping to. Clicking the happy face on the campaign page will help me towards that goal. I'll be sharing more as I have more to share. The first 2 episodes of the Instant Ink Comic Book Podcast are live. I've been having a lot of fun recording these with Roberto. I think we're onto something special here, and I think you'll enjoy it too. It's not too much of a commitment either, especially if you listen or watch on ×2 like I do for podcasts. You can find it both on YouTube and Spotify. Each recording is split up into 3 episodes covering brainstorming and writing, sketching and inking, and lettering and finishing. It's a lot of fun to see the process from end to end with different guests, plus picking their brains about comics and other geeky topics. We've got episodes scheduled through January already, so you can trust that this podcast is going to be around for a while yet. The other home away from home. I mentioned before that Niagara Falls is my home away from home. You can find that post called A Home Away from Home either on this feed or on the Substack under June 15th. But if I was just counting the hours that I've spent in a city that isn't the city I live in, Hamilton wins that by a wide margin. Hamilton definitely gets a bad rap, especially from those living in Toronto. It's our steel town. It's super dated, never having really left the 70s in architecture or mentality. It's very working class, and it's very much my home away from home. My first job there was replacing transcriptionist devices in their homes with computers that would eventually replace them entirely. That brought me to every corner of the city and into a lot of interesting homes. I wasn't always received warmly, as you might expect. After that, I got a job repairing menu boards at Tim Hortons and the computers at every Shell and Petro-Canada from Hamilton to the US border, plus other locations like Service Ontario or the Canadian Border Services. If a town had any of those in the mid to late 2000s, I've been there. The job also afforded me a lot of downtime. I happened to see a lot of Hamilton, which was always my starting point while I was waiting for the next call. It's easy to fall in love with a place when you get to know it so intimately. Not unlike most of the greater Toronto area, there's a lot of Italians in Hamilton, and its suburb of Stony Creek, affectionately known as Tony Creek. That always makes me feel a lot more comfortable, knowing that I can go to a bakery or pizza place and I'm going to get the quality I'm used to. But it's not just my snobbery about Italian delicacies that has me loving the city. There's something intangible about it, something about the underdog town that is doing a lot of things right, a lot of things that Toronto wishes it could get right in the same way, and still doesn't get any of the credit for it. Not to mention, as a fan of comics, there's a lot of comic shops to visit. That's why I knew when I was going to start going to cons, Hamilton Comic-Con was definitely one I had to check out. I picked an interesting year too, as they've moved back to a bigger building at the Hamilton Convention Center. The question is whether that move paid off. Bro time in the Hammer. My table buddy from Niagara Falls Comic-Con was busy getting hitched, and more about that at the end of this post. So I dragged my brother along to the show. He was doing double duty, both listening to me monologue our way through the weekend, while also getting some reprieve from my incessant talking while covering my Instant Ink Comic Book Podcast partner, Roberto Villacava's table occasionally. We already spent a ton of time together, between our Sunday night beer league games, season seats to Toronto FC, or our many NHL hockey road trips. How he has the patience to deal with me, I have no idea, but I really appreciate it. I especially appreciated the company this weekend, for a multitude of reasons. Easy to find. We had the great fortune of being located right at the corner of one of the entrances to the convention center. You absolutely could not miss our booth. And we had our banner strategically placed so you could find us too. Considering we were only one of 3 booths carrying comics, including Roberto's booth and the always friendly Comics Asylum, it was hard to miss us if you were looking for comics. However, much like Niagara Falls Comic Con and VonCon, not too many folks here were looking for comics at all. Where Niagara Falls was about celebrities and Von was about Pokemon cards, Hamilton seemed to be about wrestling. From Parts Unknown may have been a good fit if it were ready, but given that there weren't too many people interested in reading comics at all, based on what we could see them walking around with in hand or the way they wouldn't even break their stride when they pass our table, I'm not sure even that book would have made a dent. All that said, this might have been the best con of the 3 so far this year. A tale of 2 cons. Saturday was a decent day. Not quit our jobs and do this full-time kind of day, but a day that promised to make the weekend a success. Lots of friendly folks, a handful of which bought all 3 of Crazy Latte Thing Called Love, Unlimited Udo, and Stay Cool. Those that didn't buy comics at least showed some interest in taking a bookmark or an instant ink business card. Things dropped off pretty steeply in the final hour, but up until then it seemed like we would have a decent weekend. Then Sunday rolled around. Day 2, the show floor was an absolute ghost town. Aside from a couple of friendly folks picking up a copy of Crazy Latte, we couldn't even give away the freebies to the handful of attendees that were lumbering by our table. The energy felt low across the board. It was a good opportunity to chat with other creators at other booths, but as I've mentioned before, there weren't many comics creators to speak of at this Comic Con. So, coming back next year? No. Though, I might if one thing changes. If the con were to drop to a one-day event with the appropriate one-day table fees, I'd be back. I would have easily made table in that case, and the Saturday would have seen even more foot traffic. Putting the comic vendors and the Artist Alley comic creators would have been a boon too. Instead, we were split up by 2 floors. Worse than that, the comic creators in the Artist Alley were spread out amongst the floor, rather than put near each other where comic fans might find what they're looking for all in one spot. Not making table yet again makes it an easy choice to sit this out next year. Better luck next time? Up next is Wayside Creator Con. I'm very hopeful and excited for this one. Wayside Comics and Cocktails is a truly incredible experience. If you're anywhere near Newmarket, Ontario, I highly recommend dropping by for some comics and a drink, and to chat with the owner, Omar. He's got something really special going on here. A comics-focused con feels like the same concept in his store, but bigger and better. I have very high hopes for this one. If even a fraction of the vibe that you get at Wayside is replicated at this con, it's going to be the best of the year. I imagine it'll clear that bar with ease. I can't wait, and if you're in the area, I hope to see you in Newmarket on October 27th. And before I go, a special congrats to my film school buddy, Danon Hennessy, and his new wife, Stephanie, for tying the knot last Friday. Danon's one of the nicest guys I have the pleasure of knowing, and I couldn't be happier for him. Him and I have something really, really cool planned for next year. It actually came about while we were tabling at Niagara Falls Comic Con last summer. We'll be sharing more about that in the coming months as it all comes together. It's something very different from everything you've seen from me thus far, but well within the wheelhouse. I can't wait for everyone to get their hands on it. And that's it for this week. Let's talk about what's coming up in future posts. October 2nd, Postmortem from Parts Unknown, an in-depth look at the 4th Pesto Comics campaign. And October 9th, Don't Skimp on the Pulp, why I admire the pulp era and how it influences my work. And October 16th, Be Thankful. Happy Canadian Thanksgiving. So there was a bit of a spanner in the works in terms of how tight the schedule is going to be with new campaigns as Kickstarter didn't let me launch, but here's hoping that we can really roll through next year. I've mentioned before that my goal is to be prolific, and you'll really see that in 2025. We'll be closing out this year with at least one more cool project, if I can't squeeze 2. But next year, we might have something every month if the stars align. So I really hope you come along for the ride. It'll be a lot of fun. Until then, we'll talk next week when we review the last campaign for From Parts Unknown. I really appreciate your time. We'll talk again next week. Have a good one.